Welcome to Whistleblower Network News. I am your host, Jane Turner, FBI whistleblower and advocate. It is our honor to share with you these experiences of real life heroes and people of integrity. Welcome to Whistleblower of the Week. Today, I'm very excited to have on a person who is a hero. This person has courage, bravery. She was a prosecutor in Mexico. And if you don't think that takes a lot of bravery and courage, let me tell you, it does. Estefania Medina, welcome to our program. We're excited to have you here. You're a valiant warrior in this whole action against corruption, not only in Mexico, in the United States, but the world. Welcome to Whistleblower of the Week. Glad to have you on.
Thanks, Jane. My pleasure. You are also a hero too, and you are very inspiring. So I am glad to be here, and thanks for having me.
Well, thank you, Estefania. Can you start out by telling us a little bit about yourself, your background, your parents, where you were born, where you came from? I think that's important to know how a hero is made.
Perfect. I am from Mexico. I was born in a city called Aguascalientes, which literally means hot waters, which
Mhm.
is quite crazy. I studied law. And I finished my law degree in 2012. After that, immediately, I think that my first love in life has been criminal law. So I immediately went to a specialization in criminal law, and I started working at the Attorney General office in Mexico. It was my first job, and I moved from around many different areas in this institution, and it was an exciting, very interesting opportunity in my life. After that, I had the opportunity to go to the University of Oxford to study a law degree, in a master degree in criminology and criminal justice. And recently, I had also an incredible opportunity to study a master degree in law here in the US at the George Washington University. So it has been like a long path. And also, when I left the government in 2011, 18, when I left the government in 2018, I started an NGO called TOJIL, which is an NGO dedicated to combat corruption, but specifically using strategic criminal litigation, not just in Mexico, but also in other different jurisdictions over the world.
Very impressive. And when you're talking about Oxford, you're, of course, talking about the UK. So you have
Exactly.
been traveling. I
Yeah.
mean, that
I
very
think that
impressive.
criminal law has given me the chance to not also to practice law and try to use my expertise to try to investigate and prosecute sometimes or present cases, but also to know different places around the world and meet interesting and brave people as you now.
Excellent. And I'm very interested in this TOHIL that you established. That is a pretty impressive organization because it is its long-term goal is to access criminal justice in Mexico. Now, we often read here in the United States about the war against corruption in Mexico and the victims that occur because they fight against corruption. We read about people being assassinated. Some of these people are prosecutors like you are. Tell us how you face that.
Yeah, it's a pretty complicated issue. When I started working, as I mentioned, at the Attorney General office, I firstly started working like legislative analysis and drafting different laws, negotiating laws in Congress. But then I switched to a very interesting position. I was federal prosecutor in charge of the immediate attention unit of internal affairs, which literally means that I was in charge of receiving all all criminal complaints against police officers and prosecutors. I had a group of 13 prosecutors and around 20 police officers receiving all these complaints, analyzing, and starting conducting these investigations immediately. So it was shocking to me to know that actually there were like people, even similar positions similar to an assistant attorney general at different states in Mexico, and they sometimes were actually conducting dealings with narcos, with drug dealers, like in a huge scale. So it was pretty bad. So we need to make like different, interesting, and we need to innovate how catch these people and obviously survive, which is both complicated missions at the same time. And we developed like different ideas like undercover operations, talking to people to try to have internal information before just going to the action. So it was a pretty interesting experience in my life, and I think that it gave me like a taste in how to manage the system, how to try to present cases in court. So after this experience I realized that we needed to do something more and to go further to try to analyze things different, try to create like another counter argument from the civil society side. So for this reason, in 2018, with another co-founder, Adriana Greaves, both we co-founded TOJIL.
Wow, that is very impressive. Were you ever concerned about your personal safety?
I think I have been like we have been presenting like many cases. I think most of them are against most of the most relevant politicians that have been not just investigated and prosecuted in Mexico, but also in other countries, even people who has been prosecuted in the U.S. And we felt that we noticed that when we present those cases before a court or just criminal complaints, we receive like these friendly but kind of messages from people who know you, and they say like, okay, be aware these people will be a little bit mad because you are doing all this strategy. But I think that are times in life in which you need to be brave and we need to raise our voices. And I think that we need to create also a safe environment for not just for us, but also for other women. This is also an important topic. In Mexico, most of the criminal lawyers are traditionally, when you think about a criminal lawyer, you think this is a man. So for us,
Yes.
it has been not just important to open spaces in this anti-corruption arena, but also try to open the paths for other women that want to be part of this specific area of law, which we think it is very important, and we think that women we have a lot of things to bring to the table.
So tell me, this is really fascinating. How many women are involved in the criminal justice system in Mexico? Is it a minority, or is it about even, or what is exactly the ratio there?
I think we have like two different worlds. I think that maybe we have much more women in the public sector. When you think about office of the prosecutors, even in federal or local level, you have a lot of women working there. But I think not all of them are like in high rank positions. So this is
Mm.
important to say. But when you look to the private sector, the numbers are really low. You will
Oh.
see a lot of women in other areas of law, but not specifically in criminal law.
So what motivated you to go in this direction then? Because you're kind of a rare bird.
Exactly. But as I mentioned, criminal law has been like my first love. I think that since the first moment that I entered into law school and I took my classes, I decided that, oh, I want to do this. And when I entered honestly to my first course of criminal law, I felt like in my heart, this is the thing I want to do all my life. And it has been.
Wow. And are any of your family members involved in criminal justice, or are you the first one?
I am the first one. I have to say that one of my greatest inspirations in life has been my sister. She is a lawyer too, but she has been working more in administrative arenas, like administrative and constitutional law. So she hasn't been involved in criminal law at all. But I think she gave me like this vision that being a lawyer is like a good path in which you can not just exercise your or practice the things that you learn and you like, but also it is a very strategic position in which you can create change and you can create better things and decisions for the future of everyone.
That is correct. Tell me how big the problem of corruption in Mexico is. And I'm not going to just say Mexico, but just for this specific point here, how big is the corruption in Mexico? Is it a major problem?
A major and systematic problem. I think this is the
Ah,
main issue. When you think about corruption, we have corruption in the highest levels of the government, and we need to say the private sector too, but also citizens experience corruption even at the lower level in their interactions with police officers or people just conducting administrative searchings or analysis, whatever. So this is a systematic problem because everyone can see it, but just a little people, just a small group of people can raise their voices. So this is important for us because even I think we have been created a safe or good environment for trying to enforce and estrange our democracy. Corruption is still present. So when we think about corruption, it's pretty bad because you can think about human rights, for example. You can think
right.
about provide water, food, services for people because all of these services, you know that you will have a mm, public government contract issue of corruption, kickbacks, bribery. So this is a major problem because it is not an isolated problem. It is completely related with all things that a society needs to survive and to be like to flourish. So for this reason, we think that this is like an strategic point that we need to address. And numbers are pretty bad. I think Transparency International has put Mexico in a pretty lower rank. I think the we have a rank of 180 countries, and I think the number 180 is like, oh, perfect. The number one is like Switzerland and all these
Yes.
countries, and Mexico is ranked now 124, so pretty low in the list. When you think in a country like Mexico, in which we have like these huge companies, we have investments, we have a modern and I think growing society. So it is completely shocking that you have all these good things happening in Mexico right now, but at the same time, you have these high levels of corruption at any level.
You know, that's really an interesting point because corruption doesn't stop at the border, does it? You had an incredibly large case. I think it was referred to as Vitol, and it crossed the border. I mean, so corruption isn't just in Mexico. Its tentacles can go to a lot of different places. Would you like to tell us about that case? It's very interesting.
Yeah, that case, it wasn't a case that TOJIL presented, but it has been a huge case and very important in Mexico. And I think very important for this relationship between Mexico and the US because Vitol exposed the structural and systemic corruption that we can see in the oil and oil industry specifically. And what happened here was interesting because in short, the CFTC discovered that there were like many institutions, different companies, not just Beetle, but also Glencore, and there is another third one a company involved in series of market manipulation and
Oh,
bribery just to the object with the objective to gain contracts in Latin America, specifically in Brazil, Ecuador, and Mexico. And there was this guy, specifically Javier Aguilar, which is Mexican American, and he was investigated and prosecuted, and now he's waiting for his sentence, and he can face a sentence that could range even in 40 years imprisonment. So that is huge. And what happened here was like the FBA and other US institutions collected information about these bribes that he was offering to members of a company completely owned for Pemex, which Pemex is like the main, it's a public government organization in charge of oil and gas in Mexico. So this company was headquartered in Houston, but it was completely owned by the Mexican government. So this guy, Javier Aguilar, apparently gave a lot of bribes in order to gain information and contracts to this company. And he was catched, he was investigated, he was prosecuted, and this case has been like a huge exposure of the risk that huge companies face when they are dealing not just specifically in Mexico, but as I said, when they are dealing with Mexican companies, completely governmental owned companies, even in the US. And I think that this gives us a taste in how difficult could be even sometimes for companies try to navigate Latin American markets when they know that there is like this systemic problem.
So this is really interesting. Estefania, tell me, what is CFTC? You mentioned it.
Commission of Futures Trading. So they are in charge of trying to oversee the whole market of future commodities. So they are now, this is very important because in the past, I think that just the SEC, the Securities Exchange Commission, and other commissions have been like reviewing and analyzing kind of weird transactions that could detonate an investigation of corruption or even securities fraud. But now this Vitol case was actually the first case in which the Commodities Commission decided to investigate, and then, in obviously hand in hand with the Department of Justice, prosecute a case that was related to market manipulation and transnational fraud. And as probably all your audience know by now, we have this Foreign Corruption Practices Act, which actually allows the US government to investigate and prosecute not just local actors based in the US, but also corrupt transactions that are happening all over the world because they are in some specific hypotheses. For example, if the companies are issuers, or if the company incurs in a series of transactions using US banks accounts, or as in this case, if the act of corruption happens in the US.
Now, you mentioned that they had an office in Houston. Was the main subject located there? You said he was Mexican American. Was he located in Houston, or just an office was there?
He was located in Houston. So in this case, we identified like many reasons why the U.S. could have jurisdiction. Firstly, because the company, even if was a completely governmental owned company from the Mexican government, was headquartered in Houston. Apparently, some of the transactions occurred in Houston, and he was based in Houston. So we got like a lot of reasons why this case could be investigated and prosecuted by U.S. authorities. But even in some cases in which the corrupt transaction happened in other countries, for example, in Mexico, even in those cases, the U.S. could have jurisdiction if for example, the company is a company registered in the in the exchange commission, for example, in markets in the US. If
Sure, sure. And you prosecuted that case.
no, that
Oh,
was a case. No, when I was just analyzing, this is like a recent case. This is a 20. The trial of this guy was in in 2024. So this
Oh,
is a pretty recent case, and I think it is good to be aware about this case because
yes.
we are experiencing this shift or this change in the U.S. government, and I think that we're going to see like new tendencies or priorities from the Department of Justice, and I think that this case illustrates like the risk or things that could happen between this relationship in Mexico and the US, and how companies now will be much more exposed to this kind of liability, not just from Mexican authorities but also from the US side. And I think this is pretty interesting because we are in a good moment in which we can reinforce also from the Mexican side like integrity provisions, and also this will be a very important moment for whistleblowers who are working in complex or different sections in Mexico. It's good to know that they now have all these channels in which they can report those cases, not just to the SEC but also to the to the CFTC and even to the Department of Justice. So it will be interesting for whistleblowers, not just in the US, but also in the Mexican side.
That is a really good point. Were there whistleblowers involved in the Vitol case?
Yeah, there were whistleblowers involved, and I think this is pretty remarkable because, as I mentioned, this is the first case that the CFTC investigates and prosecutes in a case related to foreign and transnational corruption. And
Oh,
they release a notice of covered action, which informs that they inform whistleblowers that they can go to the government and say, "Hey, I helped this case, so I want to be part of the success of this case." So this is a pretty clear proof that they were successful because they had the participation of whistleblowers during the case.
were these Mexican whistleblowers or American whistleblowers? Or
I
both?
don't know. I think that by
Ah,
now, still the identity of all these whistleblowers is completely anonymous. So we
excellent.
don't know actually who the whistleblowers are. But I think
Excellent.
maybe from both sides.
Excellent. And that's what we really push for is, that the whistleblowers are not identified because, of course, that puts a target on their back. So I'm glad this process worked out as well as it did. Tell me how Mexico views whistleblowers. Hi, we'll be right back with more of Whistleblower of the Week after a quick message from one of our whistleblower friends. Don't go anywhere.
Hi, this is Austin Handel, known on social media as Officer Ash, but also known as the Dunwoody Whistleblower, and the Vice Chair of the Lamplighter Project. The Whistleblower News Network strives to be the best source of information on important whistleblower stories. In addition to in depth interviews with whistleblowers, Whistleblower News Network provides timely coverage of breaking whistleblower news, detailed analysis of whistleblower legislation, court cases, and exclusive investigative reporting on government whistleblower programs. Subscribe to the Whistleblower News Network to stay up to date on all things whistleblowers.
We are experiencing a different visions right now. I want to tell you a little bit about what
Sure.
we are doing in TOJIL because it is not like a whistleblower litigation, but it's quite similar. The thing that we have in Mexico, we have an adversarial system like in the US, but we have a pretty interesting thing. When you are a victim, you are part in the criminal proceeding. So if you
Ah,
were victim of theft or fraud, you can actively participate hand in hand with the prosecutor, providing evidence, and even you can have your own lawyer, and your lawyer can actively participate in court, and your lawyer can challenge prosecutors and judges' decisions. So victims are pretty important in Mexico because they are like a third party within the criminal proceeding. So we realized from TOJIL that it was pretty clear for everyone in cases in which the harm is like an individual harm, like theft, rape, which is pretty bad, obviously, or any of those cases. But what happened, and who are the victims in corruption cases? This was a huge question. Are the government institutions, are the society in general. And the most important question was, who is defending these victims before court or before even the prosecutors, that it is well known that sometimes prosecutors that are investigating corruption are also committing corruption because they want to open the doors to these people. So from TOJIL, we analyzed this issue and we discovered that we had a super interesting article at the National Victims Law, which actually says like, if the crime was created a collective harm, an NGO or an organization can be considered as victim. So from TOJIL, we used this article and we started presenting and filing criminal complaints against politicians and relevant cases that have been like completely well investigated in the journalistic side. And we file these complaints and we request to have this legal standing as victims of corruption. And I am very happy to share that in 2019 we won the first case that recognizes a federal court recognizes that an NGO as TOJIL could be considered as victim within the criminal proceedings in a huge case related with Javier Duarte, which was a former governor of Veracruz, accused to divert tons of hundreds of dollars. So that is our strategy, which is pretty similar to the rationales behind whistleblowers, which are citizens acting on behalf of this harm that is committed when people commit fraud or even bribery.
That is really interesting. And TOJIL is an NGO, so they can represent in court.
Exactly. So this is not completely a set precedent. We have been fighting in different cases, trying to open this discussion much more clearly. And I think that we need to open this discussion not just in courts, but also maybe we need to amend several laws in order to make it much more clear. It is interesting because we have been analyzing different laws around the world, and you can see that, for example, France, they have a specific article within their criminal procedure code in which allows specifically NGOs dedicated to combat corruption to actively participate as a third party civil, which is like the alternative of this scheme that we have. And obviously it has been super interesting for us to know that even if the US, the big victims cannot actively participate as third parties, this whole thing about whistleblowers, it's quite similar. For example, when you think not just about criminal side but also the civil side, for example, False Claims Act, you have whistleblowers that can file a suit against specific people. The government can decide if they want to be part of not of this case, but if the government doesn't want to be part of or continue this case, even this whistleblower can continue the whole civil proceeding. So we think that we have these kind of similarities, and I think that now after these exchanges of knowledge and experiences between Mexico and the US, I think in Mexico we are rethinking about not just the place or the role that victims can play in order to be a change maker for anti-corruption purposes, but also whistleblowers that maybe are not victims or even are not witnesses, but they are whistleblowers that they want to blow the whistle, raise their voice, and try to help governments to investigate and effectively prosecute these people that are committing corruption everywhere.
Yes. And what is the reputation of whistleblowers in Mexico? Do they have, like we struggled for years and years under the, labels such as snitch and rat and all these terrible things? Has Mexico, what kind of reputation do they give their whistleblowers?
We don't have this is a even is a terminology that is still in construction. I don't think that the public is like pretty aware like it is this is bad or this is good. I think most of the kind of whistleblowers, which are not actually whistleblowers but people who at some point allows to cooperate with the government providing more information, they have been seen much more like criminals, people who actively participate within the
Oh.
criminal scheme, and maybe they were subject to any kind of plea bargain with much more lesser sentence or even no sentence at all if they actively participate and provide information to the government. But we don't have like this specific figure in which a person that maybe could be a third party with no strong relationships with the parties or with the facts can provide information and receive an award. We don't have this specific model established in Mexico. I think that the most similar thing that we have are these victims participation, but there is a tough discussion because not all whistleblowers will be victims directly from the crime. So no, we are now in construction of this a much more robust scheme for whistleblowers in Mexico.
Are people in Mexico aware of the financial awards that they're able to get if they're in these industries such as the banking, commodities, gas, oil? Are they filing through the United States, or is Mexico planning on establishing something that will help their whistleblowers?
I think that there is not a lot of knowledge from in general, specifically in these strategic industries, about the two facts. Firstly, that the U.S. has jurisdiction to even investigate and prosecute many cases that maybe occur in Mexico. I think that much more people should be aware about this situation. Secondly, that if they provide information, obviously following all these steps, presenting a TCR or other steps that people should follow in order to be subject to receive an award, they could receive this monetary retribution from the U.S. government. So we started working hand in hand with the Mexican embassy, the U.S. embassy based in Mexico, trying to provide more information to other NGOs and even people who are in the private sector to be aware about this scheme, that even if Mexico hasn't established like a complete scheme to protect and provide rewards to whistleblowers, there are still many cases that will be under under US jurisdiction, and they could be subject to be rewarded if they provide this anonymous and confidential and useful information for those cases.
And I'm aware that you're working right now with whistleblower advocates. So you're familiar with the whistleblower offices in different governmental agencies in the United States. There's in the Department of Justice, there's one, SEC. It's in different agencies. And you're probably familiar with the UK trying to establish an office of the whistleblower. So we see all these things happening in the world. And can you state your opinion where you think Mexico should go in terms of their whistleblowers?
Yeah, for sure. This is a thing that we are trying to boost in Mexico. We think that it will be pretty important for the agencies that are currently investigating and prosecuting these cases, because you have people who provide information, something about the cases, but you don't have like this complete involvement and commitment to continue be providing a lot of information. I remember when I was prosecutor investigating those cases, you sometimes receive like a huge complaint with a lot of information, but you need something to talk about it, and you need maybe much more clear and efficient evidence that you will be actually able to present before a trial court, for example. So I think that Mexico is in been a pretty good moment to implement new rules to provide rewards to the whistleblowers. I think rewards and also protection to whistleblowers. It will be
Yes.
crucial, and I think that it has been a long discussion in the UK. They are a little bit reluctant to provide rewards to the
Hmm.
whistleblowers because I think people see this like a, if they want that people will do all these things just for the money, and I think it is not the case. When you
No.
look at your specific cases that you know that you have heard here, people that actually are providing this information, they are putting their lives at risk. This is
Yes.
not just about your job, this is not just about your mental health, but also it's about your safety and even your probabilities to survive. So when we analyze all these things, I think that whistleblowers should be rewarded not just because obviously its participation was pretty useful, but also because we need to incentivize people who are scared but who are important information that could be pretty useful to investigate these cases.
Well said. Well said. So you're familiar with what's happening with whistleblowers uh, throughout the world. You appear to be right up on top of it. You're familiar with what the UK is doing. You're familiar with the agencies in the United States. And you are just primed to take a leadership role. And I'm really interested to hear what your plans are for the future. I mean, you've been to Oxford, you're attending Georgetown. These are incredible credentials to have. You're getting experience right now in with a whistleblower advocacy agency there in Washington D.C. Tell us what your plans are. I mean, this is incredible what you've built here.
Thank you. Well, I am really excited because I have great news. Recently, I was informed that I passed my New York City bar exam. So
Yes,
hopefully,
congratulations.
thank you. So after a little bit of paperwork, I think that hopefully will be a Mexican and U.S. attorney license. So I think it will be very important to me because I really like not just to being in this part like designing strategies or involving new ideas. I really enjoy to be in court. So I think that maybe not now, but at some point it will be like a good plan for me. And also, I am glad to share that from TOJIL, we open another interesting area, which is much more of focus on try to help private sector to develop these online systems or hotline systems in which whistleblowers can also uh, blow the whistle internally, report cases in much more independent way, and we are trying to do this also to help Mexican companies and companies based in Mexico to navigate all these issues that maybe they are experiencing. So many things I think for the following months. I think that hopefully I will survive trying to manage all these things that are in my mind now, but yeah.
I am just so thrilled. It sounds like your career is just where it should be, and you're going to make a difference in the world. Do you have any closing comments for us? I'm just delighted to have you on the program. You are going to be the answer for the world's problems, and it's exciting to have you on Whistleblower of the Week. Do you want to give us some closing comments, Stefana?
Yes.
It's been wonderful.
Thank you, Jen. It has been wonderful to meet you and to be here. And I would like to talk specifically about to your youth audiences and specifically to women. If they feel that they have this inner passion, love for being part of working criminal law, going to courts, please never lose these passions and these ideas, not just because the whole world is telling you like no, you will not be able to do that. That will be so difficult. That is much more like a rude arena. Don't listen to these people. Just go to law school and do the things that they really want to go, because I think there are many things that women we have to bring to the table in order to reshape criminal justice systems around the world.
That is some wonderful. You are a brilliant light. Can people reach you through this TOJIL? Is it possible? Is there a communication link there for you where people
For
can
sure.
reach out? I mean, those words are inspiring that you just gave to women. Is there a link?
Yeah, for sure. They can contact me through our webpage. It's www.tojil.org. So I will also when this episode will be online, I will be more than glad that put more details there.
Estefania Medina, a bright light in a dark world. Thank you so much again. You can get a hold of her on her link here at tojil.org. Thank you so much for your time. It has been a sincere pleasure to talk to you today, Estefania. Thank you for listening, and please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. If you want to read more whistleblower stories, go to www.whistleblowersblog.org. Music by Rachel Kilgore. Editing and booking by Anissa Sheikh and Victoria Thompson. And a special thanks to our sponsors, Whistleblower Network News.
I think you'll find that it's just as hard to stand up tall as it was when you were small. The truth is hard to say.